How many lovers have you made today? Chapter 7. Temporary Silence. Celestia stands upon her balcony, the morning air brushing past her as she overlooks her city. The soft glow of their lights dull with a break of first light. A new day is upon the citizens, but not for the princess, as she did not find a wink of rest last night. She spent her night thinking about Anon, worrying over what they spoke on. After lunch, he asked to be alone for some time, as he wasn't feeling well. It was understandable, as she too felt some butterflies in her stomach, so she accepted without complaint. She went about her day as she usually would. There was plenty of busy work to keep her preoccupied as the hours went by, but even then, she would wonder about him. Dinner came around, and yet he was absent. Luna, Spike, and even Twilight were there, but Luna's captain came by to say that Anon was still under the weather, and was going to rest alone in his chambers for the night. It was a rather quiet dinner between them all. Come bedtime, Luna went off to perform her royal duties, and Celestia was left alone in her room. Lying in bed, she assured herself that Anon was fine, and was just the unforeseen emotional circumstance that put him off. Being vulnerable is difficult, and Celestia too fears the time when she will genuinely lay her heart bare and allow Anon to decide what to do with her love. She went to bed with these hopeful thoughts. However, it did little to bring her a peaceful rest. She tossed and turned, noticing the lack of something beside her. The faint sense of Anon was still there. It comforted and hurt her, as it was a little consolation to his absence. Memories of a time when she would rest without anyone, and how lonely things truly were without him. Minutes turned to hours, and rest never came. She thought about going to his room, but decided against it, as he apparently wanted time to himself. Celestia turns from the balcony and enters back into her chamber to ensure she's ready for morning court.
Give him time, that's all he needs.
He'll come back, and from there they can move forward. She'll tell him those 3 fateful words, and perhaps he'll say them as well. Maybe not immediately, but given time, he'll know that her heart is pure, and only for him. But for now, she'll focus on work and allow him his time to think. Patience. That's what matters here. Spike covers his mouth as he yawns to himself, setting another book he's finished aside before reaching for another. With the exception of dinner, Spike hasn't left Luna's library since lunch yesterday, only taking small breaks here and there to rest his eyes. It's all the same, as late-night study isn't a new thing for him. Twilight used to ask for his help all the time, so it's second nature to him. Though he will admit that when he started, his interest was purely to help Twilight find the sister's birthday, but now, he's become enraptured by the many stories held in this collection. There are personal notes from Starsworld a bearded before the age of Arcana, and his creation of the first levitation spell. Not to mention many detailed history books that held the Hoofclaw written accounts of the battles that took place from various skirmishes. A series of combat-related texts that taught self-defense for both magic and non-magic species. So much was here, things he's sure aren't available anywhere else. However, as the hours went on, he fell into a different sort of book. At first, he thought it was nothing more than a log of basic happenings of the kingdom, taxes, and the like. However, as he kept reading, the accounts became more personal, and he soon realized that this was written by Luna herself. It talked about the rise of the kingdom, how things were faring, and what worries she had. With each new page, more depth was found, and it soon became something akin to a diary. Spike wasn't sure if Luna knew they were here and questioned if he should be reading them, but it was by far the best lead he could find. Since finding them, he's been following this series since sundown, late into the night, and now the rising sun. If he's thankful for one thing, it's that these books have been organized into a sequence, each one beside the other, so moving between them is seamless.
I hope this isn't a dead end.
Spike yawns to himself. There's gotta be something here.
Why is it that today, of all days, I find myself feeling giddy? It's humorous in a way that despite the battles I've had, that such a simple day could incite these emotions from me. Though admittedly, as work mounts and time passes, we find these moments slipping from our minds ever so slightly. Why, it wasn't but a few months ago that my sister surprised me with a party, to which I forgot was even on that day. Though now she will find herself at the receiving end. As within a son's time, I will have everything ready.
Spike's eyes slowly widen at the text before him. This is it? He scans the page for any date and is thankful to find one in the bottom left corner. The smile on his face slowly falls as something strikes him odd about this date. Why is it so familiar? He shakes that away. He finally found it. He pulls out a small piece of parchment and writes it down. Once done, he closes the book and makes sure everything is where he found it before sprinting out of the room and towards the library. The smile returns as he feels something he hadn't felt in a long time. A warmth from helping Twilight when she needed him. Anon is peering off into the ceiling as he tries to make sense of the turmoil inside of him. It's been a restless night for him. He brings an arm to rest over his eyes in an attempt to suppress a headache that's plagued him since yesterday. It's a futile attempt, as nothing today can bring him from thinking about her. He chuckles sadly to himself. Not even the fiasco with Twilight is enough to stop all the questions he has. The conversation is etched into his memory, every single detail. Even as he made his excuse to be alone, she still had that loving look. He expected so many doubts to flood him that night, and yet the only thing to take him were his musings of Celestia. No questions, worries, or concerns, just the pain in his chest and the warmth she exudes. Despite her not being there, he could almost sense her worry for him. Just laying there made him realize a few things. The most important was how cold things felt, and a crushing sense of loneliness with her gone. He's become accustomed to her being there, and it's uncomfortable when she's not. However, the silence fades as his thoughts start to creep back into his psyche. What is he going to do about this? There's so much that can go wrong, no matter what path he chooses. Why does this have to be so hard? He's sure of one thing. He doesn't want to lie to her. But at the same time, he can't tell her how he feels either. He wants to protect her, make her happy. But there's no way she'd be satisfied with him. Anon winces as his thoughts sour. He's broken, unreasonable, and causes trouble. She deserves so much more than him, and yet the idea of losing her is agonizing. Why is he irrational? This should be simple. And yet he can't hear any voices inside of him trying to dissuade his love. Maybe because I'm the overall problem, not her. Anon tosses his blankets off as he gets out of bed. Walking over to the dresser, he gets everything ready for the day in a vain attempt to forget about this. These thoughts are not so quickly quelled, creeping back to the front of his mind. He's gonna die one day. That sobers him up considerably. Even if he wanted to try and see if she were interested, he'd never live down the fact that one day he'll pass, and all the love she has will become toxic, hurting her far more than anything he could ever do in his lifetime. Feeling lightheaded, Anon rests his hands on the dresser to keep stable. He can't do that to her. She's made his life better. He should be grateful. All this love stuff is just a fantasy. That's all it'll ever be. He must ensure that it stays that way. Taking a few breaths, he nods a few times to reassure himself. The pain he feels now will pass, and from there he can move. This is for her. He takes in his reflection, seeing the large bags under his eyes and messy appearance. He'll lock what he feels so deep that she'll never know the difference. He takes a moment to clean up. Twilight will help keep his mind preoccupied as he buries these feelings. It won't take long before he puts this behind him. One day at a time, Anon says to himself. Anon dresses in silence, making sure he's ready for this breakfast with Twilight. Twilight waits at her study table, dressed in her finest for this upcoming breakfast, all the while with a book in front of her as she lazily glosses over it. Her mind is elsewhere as she thinks over what could happen at this meeting with Shining and Cadence. It's none of your business, Twilight. Shining scoffs in the back of her mind. Twilight winces. It's true. They're living their own lives, and it's not any of her business if they're getting married. But still, that doesn't suddenly make the pain she feels knowing they've kept this from her go away. She closes her book and pushes it aside as more negative thoughts flood her. In a few minutes, this will become a reality, as she'll be berated by the ones she thought cared for her. She covers her head with her hooves, trying to drown out the venomous whispers of her brother and caregiver.
This was a horrible idea.
She should call it off while there's still time. Getting cold feet? Anon is looking down at Twilight as she lies pitifully on her desk in silence. She looks up at him, startled, but then hastily clears her face. Twilight faces away with shame.
Maybe we should call it off.
We're in this together. If the worst should come, I'll be there. Even saying that makes Anon want to vomit. Twilight's thoughts calm as she faces Anon. Once again, he's so kind to her, and for reasons she's not fully aware of. But that's okay. At least he's here for her. That means the world to her right now.
Okay, sorry to be this much of a mess.
She brushes her mane back in place. I've been there. No worries. So, are you ready? Anon wants to get the show on the road before he starts doubting his resolve. Twilight nods in agreement, but then notices something out of place.
Where's the captain?
Without so much as a sound, Blossom lands beside Anon. Her eyes are locked onto Twilight.
I'm always around.
She turns her attention to Anon.
Feeling well?
I'll let you know once this is over.
Anon turns back to Twilight.
Anything we need to know before this thing goes down?
Twilight shakes her head.
Nothing worth noting.
She scuffs her hoof onto the floor.
Just stay, no matter what happens.
Closing his eyes, Anon tries to center his thought. Funny. Even with Twilight this close, he still can't shake Celestia from his mind. How did he manage to get himself into this fine mess?
Pending magical means. I'll be there.
Twilight smiles brightly at Anon, but as she looks into his eyes, she notices something isn't quite right. She's not sure what it is, but his demeanor is causing her to worry. It's like he's slowly locking something away. It's a look she recognizes whenever she looks in a mirror. Is he in trouble? Does she need someone to help him?
No, he has friends that are more than willing to help. So why does he look lonely?
She's stuck between asking him and keeping her silence. She'll keep an eye out, but overall, it's none of her business, and she doesn't want to upset him by meddling in his affairs. I get a feeling something's gonna go wrong. Anyways, let's get on to our positive donators. Top donators are 630, BadassWaffle, Onlyonething, Ceru, Orion, IronSky, and Jessie Smith. Magic 109, JockeTF, JockSide, Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Pastel, Sky, Alistair, Rolan, Stu Hex, Sword Brother, Mortar, Domercon, Lyra, Rubentype 9852, Will, Chris Twinkie, Rascal, Shadow Moon, Luigi 88, Chance, Request, Big Smoke 369, Bobcat, GGF, Murder Princess, and many more amazing people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.